The sports you love, the teams you can't live without.
Get a sense of urgency!
This is Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5 The KSL Sports Zone. Big news day today here on the show. The Jazz have hired Austing Ainge to be their next president of basketball operations. Let's get a national reaction. Joining the show now, we welcome him back. Of course, he makes the magic happen at Spotrac. He is our buddy Keith Smith. What's going on, Keith?
A lot. We get the finals coming, the off season's cranking up. This is the best time of the year.
What do you know of Austing Ainge? I know you live in Orlando. I know you've covered the Celtics closely because you've covered the NBA throughout. But what do you know of Austing in your interactions?
Yeah, he is someone who has been preparing for this for a long time. Cut his teeth in the G League initially is where he started running Boston's G League team there. So that he did that for a while. Was a big part of the team's draft prep for a very long time. And then in more recent years has taken over and been really the guy for the team as far as their draft prep and their international scouting goes with all that stuff, both collegiate and international. He's a big part of why they've hit several times on late draft picks in the first round and even a handful of second-round guys and undrafted players, and then some international guys that they've brought over from overseas or guys who were former NBA guys that have gone overseas and come back. So big part of their success over the years.
So overall, what's your evaluation of the Jazz Brain Trust now? Because Justin Zanuck is staying as general manager and Danny Ainge is staying on as CEO. So your thoughts on kind of what the front office looks like?
Yeah, I think it's really kind of an unknown. I think you've got a lot of people there who do good stuff with both Ainges now in the fold and Justin Zanuck. But my question is, who really is running things? Who has the day-to-day responsibilities of working with other GMs, working with other folks in the course of trade discussions, who's working in organizing the scouting and all those things that happen. And then, of course, the most important thing, who has final say on these transactions? It's very odd to have a president of basketball operations and then someone else above them that isn't the owner of the team. So is this Danny Ainge is sunsetting on his career and moving into a different direction? In Austin now it's final say. Where does that go? Justin Zanuck's a guy who's been around for a long time, done a lot of the day-to-day heavy lifting of the team's front office work as the GM. What is his say in the organization? That's all stuff that I think will eventually get clarified, and that's something that's going to need clarified for everybody to understand how this is really working.
Keith, if Austin's last name wasn't Ainge, would he have still ended up with a president of basketball operations job somewhere in the NBA if it wasn't with the Jazz?
I think so. I don't know that it would have been quite this immediate, but I do think he would have got there at some point because he's been kind of knocking on the door of that for a while now. There was rumors over the last handful of GM openings that he could have been a candidate for any number of teams there, and just never kind of went that way. The teams have had for a hard time over the years getting people to leave the Boston front office because they've been so successful over any number of years. So that's something that I think they're going to be really kind of looking at down the line. But yeah, I mean, you're going to get the whole nepotism stuff that comes up and all the things that happen there. But I don't know that is cut and dry, but I understand why people are going there. But I think he would have been a candidate at some point.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the finals and matchup of two obviously monster market teams. But your thoughts on the Pacers? A lot of people see them as the big underdog. Do they have much of a shot in this?
I think they do, because I think they counter the things Oklahoma City does really well in some unique ways. The Thunder, one of the things that they do better than just about any team in the league is they start turning you over. They're the best team I can ever remember of turning a 5-point deficit into a 15-point lead in like the blink of an eye. So I think with the Pacers, the fact that they rarely play any minutes without 2 or 3 real ball handlers on the floor. They don't turn it over very much. They tend to stay more poised in the way they work offensively. I think that is a big counter to the way the Thunder want to play. The Thunder are a better team. Don't get me wrong. They've got more things they can go to. They've got more versatility, I think, in their lineups than Indiana does. But I think Indiana has a chance simply because Halliburton's that good, and he's gotten to the point where if he wants to play fast, you play fast. If he wants the game to be slowed down, he slows the game down.
Looking at what the Pacers have done, this has kind of been a big talking point on our show. Are we just going to see more teams like this? Kind of what we would assume is a random team or perceive as a random team making a run to the finals versus, kind of the who's who of the NBA who seems to be in the finals most years. Is it going to be more varied like this?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think people are way overreacting to this, and everybody's, the new CBA, and, it's ruined, dynasties and all these things. It's harder to build a team that's going to be around for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, like we've seen with a handful of teams over the recent years. But I think you're still going to see more often than not teams will get there and then they'll kind of sustain. It just might be for a little bit of a shorter window. You will get surprises like this. Don't get me wrong. You're going to see some teams kind of hop in there that you weren't really expecting. But, yeah, I think this has just kind of been a weird year a little bit for the NBA with some teams that have been traditional powers stepping back and a handful of other teams, stepping forward like the Pacers, like the Thunder did, in some ways the Knicks, having a much better year than they've had in previous years. So I think we're just in a spot now where we're starting to look at it being, let's not overreact to what we have going on immediately, but I think, we will see a little bit more parity and variance in the years to come.
Why do you think the Knicks came up short?
I think they're just, I think the big thing for them is they weren't good enough defensively in the end to really, slow down the Pacers at all. And in the games they won, they'd outscore the Pacers, which is a weird place for a Tom Thibodeau team to be, but that's where you're at. When your anchors on both ends of your team are Jalen Brunson at point guard and Karl-Anthony Towns at center, you're going to have to find ways to get stops, with other guys and through scheme things. And Indiana just had too many things they could go to, too many good players. And the fact that the Pacers are able to turn a lot of these games into track meets, getting up and down. That's not how the Knicks want to play. And they just weren't able to keep up, no pun intended. They weren't able to keep pace with the Pacers. And they also just weren't able to score enough in the end or get enough stops. And that's why ultimately they lost.
Keith, the East gets really interesting this offseason because Milwaukee's obviously run into some turmoil, and there's talk that maybe they finally are willing to move Giannis Antetokounmpo, and he's open to the idea. The Celtics are going to be without Jason Tatum all of next year. The Knicks look like they're close, but probably aren't good enough to get there. The Magic need to add another piece. There just seems like there's a lot of movement that's going to happen with the top teams in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got, everybody's kind of wondering what are the Cavs going to do, right? They had this incredible regular season and then fell in the second round. I think they'd be best served to kind of run it back. I think the Knicks should do that as well. I don't think those teams should feel that they're that far off the Pacers. All credit to Indiana, of course, but I would not feel like, we're miles behind those guys as far as catching them to move forward. And then, yeah, you're right. Boston's going to take a step back. If Milwaukee trades Giannis, that's going to be a whole different thing there for them. Who knows what Philadelphia does? They finally hit that, magical, healthy season and make a real run, or are they going to kind of continue to go through it? So, yeah, absolutely, a lot of turmoil in the East. And, it's one of those things where the East continues to put good teams at the top, 3, 4, 5 teams, and then behind them the rest of the way it gets really, really rough.
You hearing anything out there, Keith, about Lauri Markkanen and his future, and would you be surprised if the Jazz moved him?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think, there's certainly teams that have interest. I think for some teams it's great that he's on this long-term contract now because they don't have to worry about him leaving. There's other teams that I think would look at that and say, not really, where we want to go long-term with our money. He can be a little bit of a difficult guy to build around because he's a great offensive player, but not anybody who's going to anchor a defensive spot. As a big, that can be a little tough, like we talked about with Towns. When you have a big that can kind of be picked on a little bit, that can make things hard. But there's certainly going to be opportunities where teams would love to have Lauri Markkanen in the fold. And then I think for the Jazz themselves, they're really in a tough spot. Not staying in the top couple picks in the lottery. That's just so big because it was such a blow to the franchise that you're still going to get a good player at 5, of course, but it's just not going to be a transformational type guy like you were hoping for out of this draft class. And that has to put them in a spot where they say, all right, do we do it again? Do we, run it back with Darren Peterson and AJ DeBonsa and handful of really Cam Boozer, other good players at the top of this coming draft? Or do we have to really start to move things forward towards winning? Because I know there are some frustrations within the fan base. I see him on social media all the time, complaining about, hey, we just kind of threw away 3 years in a row, and we're no better off than we were, when we started this whole process. And that can be the tough thing when you're trying to build through draft picks and through the draft.
Suns are in the news today. Johnny Bryant, former Jazz assistant, former University of Utah player, a finalist for their head coaching job, one of 2 finalists there. What do you think is the best case scenario for the Suns this summer? And I don't mean with their coaching hire. I mean with Kevin Durant. I mean with Devin Booker. I don't think they're going to be able to move Bradley Beal, though I'm sure they're going to try again. What's a good situation look like for Phoenix entering next season?
I'm going to give you 2 different answers. A good situation would be blow it up as best you can, trade Durant, trade Booker, start all over, get as much draft capital in the door as you can since you've traded almost everything you can possibly trade draft pick-wise and hope it looks better moving forward. Then I think the other piece, though the realistic path is going to be they're going to try to get guys back in a Kevin Durant trade that can win now. You're absolutely right. They're going to do the best they can to try to find a Bradley Beal trade. I don't know that they're going to. And they're just going to try to be as good as they possibly can around Devin Booker. They've made it clear through ownership and the front office that they don't have any real appetite for rebuilding. They, what we just talked about it with the Jazz, can be kind of hard if you don't hit in the draft. They've basically said, yeah, that's not what we want to do. We want to be competitive. They don't believe that building through the draft is something that necessarily will always work. So I think they're going to try to shortcut this a little bit. I think it's going to end up being similar results to where they've been this year, which is probably battling around the play-in tournament line and probably an easy out in the first round.
What are your thoughts on this year's draft? The Jazz are at 5, and we've had several pundits say this is a 4-player draft, and the Jazz sit at 5. But any thoughts on what this year's draft looks like?
Yeah, I mean, you've got obviously Cooper Flagg in his own tier at the top. Then I've got Dylan Harper kind of in his own tier at number 2. And then things flatten out a little bit. VJ Edgecombe and Ace Bailey are the 2 next guys, but not every team is sold on both of those guys. So there is a chance you could see some movement there. But I think Utah's got a chance to come away with a really good player. Almost no matter what they do, there's going to be a lot of talent still on the board, even if those 4 guys are the first 4 off the board at the draft. You've still got guys like Kon Knippel, and you've got Kasper Yakushonis and Kaman Mawach, really good players that are going to be available for them if they want to go that way. It kind of gives them a little bit of optionality too. I think the way the roster is coming together, it feels like they're maybe a little guard heavy, but none of those guys I think are so locked in that it's like, we can't go get another guard. If they feel like there's a better guard in this draft class, go get him. The same thing with the big man position. If you feel like it's someone's going to be better than Walker Kessler, you go get him, and then maybe explore the trade market for Walker Kessler. But it's massive disappointment to have slipped as far as you can possibly slip in the draft, of course. But they're still going to come away with a really good player because I think it's a pretty deep draft, through 8-10 players, and then it kind of levels out from there.
Keith, thank you as always. We appreciate you jumping on with us.
Appreciate it, Keith.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
All right, there you go. That's our buddy Keith Smith from Spotrac talking about all things NBA.
Melting away in the Orlando heat right now.
Had really good things to say about Austing Ainge.
I don't think you're going to hear bad things about Austing Ainge. The weird thing about it is just that, his dad is Danny Ainge. His dad works for the Jazz, and people are going to assume that's the only way he got the job. And Keith, that's why I asked him, would he have gotten this job otherwise somewhere? And he said probably eventually, maybe not this early, which I think will be the question, and maybe why, Danny Ainge sticks around for a year or two until it feels like Austin's going at full speed, has the full lay of the land and is ready to go and, make his own hires and bring other people in that he wants to, a scouting staff. Like, that's the other part of that comes in with this, is that when you hire a new president of basketball operations, they bring in their people. You look at when Kevin O'Connor left, like a lot of the Jazz people left, you wanted to see, or Dennis Lindsay wanted to see his own people come in. You look across the NBA landscape, like Walt Perrin was the former lead scout for the Jazz. He got hired to go do the same job for the Knicks, and they hired Leon Rose, and Walt was out of a job. So that's how it works. So there's going to be a lot of turnover for the Jazz, but probably doesn't happen immediately. It might happen over the next 12 months or 24 months, and I would imagine maybe Danny Ainge stays in his spot until some of those things are finalized.
If I'm Austin, this is exactly what I do, Ben.
Okay.
All right? I create a separate social media account specifically created to defend me on social media.
Can't go wrong.
Probably leak some maybe potentially, juicy injury information in the process of defending myself online. But here's the brilliance of it, Ben. If you get caught, all you have to do is throw your wife right under the bus.
Sure.
I mean, Brian Colangelo laid it out.
Mastered it.
I mean, just a masterclass.
Yeah.
I mean, you're so thin-skinned that you can't handle a bunch of social media bozos.
Making fun of your shirt.
Yeah, right. So you got to get in there and really defend yourself.
Yeah.
But again, the last line of defense is throwing your wife under the bus. I don't know Austin's
I don't know
wife,
his marital situation.
If she would go along with such a plot. But it really is brilliant.
I do think it's smart to have somebody who's 44 years old coming in.
Wasn't that the stupidest story? That whole situation. The Sixers are the worst franchise. They are so bad.
Yeah. For a team that has had reasonable luck in the draft historically, I know they tanked a bunch to get it, but they did get the number one pick several times in that run and ended up with Joel Embiid and drafted Tyrese Maxey. They've done some things very well. Yeah.
I think they only got it once, actually, didn't they? And they had to trade for it?
And they traded up to get Markelle, and they got Ben Simmons. But
that,
they had good picks.
Ben
They weren't
Simmons,
falling
that's
to
right.
5.
That's right. Ben Simmons.
So to be in that spot, yes.
Anyway, I'm just
The
comparing
76ers.
nepotism hires. Sorry.
I agree. No, I totally understand. Probably a fireable offense. in
And
all honesty.
that story is so ridiculous, it will never not be funny.
But I think having a 44-year-old is probably the right age for the job. I think you need to be in your prime.
Okay, your dad is a prominent professional. Do you think you could have ever embarrassed him so badly that he has to fall off the map? Like, I don't think we've heard from Jerry Colangelo since
In a
because his
while.
son is such an
Jerry-
embarrassment.
Yeah, I think Jerry was even done running he put together the Olympic teams, and now it's Grant Hill, right? I think
I honestly think
Jerry's out of a
he's
job.
very involved in Grand Canyon University and what's going on down at that. So I actually think that's what he's doing. But the joke still is out there. Like, could you embarrass your father so bad that he would have to leave his
disappear.
profession?
I definitely have the megaphone to do it.
I know.
Yeah, so yeah.
So you could.
But the nice thing,
That would
I
be
mean,
a big mistake.
He's he's an artist now.
I know.
He's a retired artist now. Retired person who is now an artist.
Like, the value of his work goes down just because he's associated with you.
Sure. Very possible.
Christian, think you could get your dad fired?
I don't think so.
No?
No, his job is pretty not connected to
Insulated.
this at all, yeah.
Pretty insulated? Okay.
I mean, that's the nice thing about being an artist too, right? Other than it is purely public opinion. So if they were like, his son, they'd be like, we can't even bring him into the arts festivals anymore.
You being a degenerate, though, might actually make his
Sure.
go. Like, if he has an infamous son, it might actually make the value of it go up.
Right. George Bush Jr., W. Like his paintings sell. He's actually a pretty good painter.
I don't think he does sell his paint. Does he sell them? I don't
He
think
does.
he
He
does.
sells them. He actually donates the money to
Does he?
veterans.
So
which
this
is
isn't
a very cool story.
isn't a Hunter Biden thing where
No, I don't
he's
think so.
putting $500,000 a pop right in his
I
pocket.
haven't seen Hunter's work, but George Bush is actually a pretty good painter.
I always thought that was a
real skill.
cool hobby for a former president.
And but they probably do sell in part A because the proceeds go to a very good place, but B because the president painted it, not because
That's
he's the
100%.
best painter available to buy.
Yeah, no, that's
it.
100% of the value.
Right.
That's not like
So
part
maybe
of the equation.
I could do that for my father a little bit.
That's
with
all of the
fame or infamy.
Exactly. Well, your dad's kind of infamous in a way.
He is. He went viral again over the weekend. Can't
I
get
did
away
see
from
that.
him. Yep.
See you on Monday, Bundy.
Yep. Went back.
Well, that's good. Who picked it up? I saw some other...
Internet Hall of Fame, which might be the biggest that's ever retweeted it. Internet Hall of Fame has like 4 million followers.
They have
Nice.
a gold check mark.
They have a gold check mark, yeah, on Twitter.
How much do you have to pay for that?
Yeah, right. It's like $14
You have to be,
a month.
I think you have to be given
$9.99.
it. You have to be given it.
Oh, do you?
So they got rid of the blue check mark to sell the blue check mark, only to create a gold check mark.
That's the actual original blue check mark.
This is so like the Sneetches.
It's a cat in the wall.
Yeah, it's
Right?
totally-
It's a golden cat in the wall.
Oh, man. All right. Big thanks to Keith for jumping on with us. Stay tuned. We'll have more coming up next. Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
With our crazy opinions.
Hey, what you doing?
Well, now it's time to hear from you.
Hey, great show.
Download the KSL Sports app and fire off your thoughts with the call-in tab on the bottom of your screen.
Your show is fantastic. It's the one that captivates me the most.
You can tell PK to stop singing.
Cheap bangs! Cheap bangs!
Let Jake and Ben know what you really think of the Jazz. Tell Hans and Scotty about your favorite barbecue spot or what color of tie JJ should be wearing on TV. The best entries will be played on the air. Download the KSL Sports app now and hit the call-in button to let your voice be heard.
I think you guys do an incredible job.
This is 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Whether it's the Jazz, Utes, Cougars, or Aggies, these guys have got you covered.
Time to eat, fellas.
You're locked on to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson
1, 2, 3, move it.
on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. I want to remind you about Win Ticket Wednesday. Win big every week on the KSL Sports Zone with Win Ticket Wednesday. This Wednesday, you can win tickets to Aerofest with Styx, Kevin Cronin, the former lead singer of REO Speedwagon, and Don Felder, formerly of the Eagles. That's coming up June 11th, so very soon, Ben, at Utah First Credit Union Amphitheater. Tickets on sale now at livenation.com, or you can listen to the KSL Sports Zone all day on Wednesday for your chance to win. Ben, the Knicks have been out of the playoffs for how long? Like 48 hours?
Yeah.
And already reports are coming out about people complaining about Karl-Anthony Towns.
He had a bad final game. Numbers looked okay, but he had a bad final game. Really some horrendous defensive possessions, but that's who he is. You know, the Knicks and the Timberwolves both traded really flawed players. And in the most important games of the season, you saw their flaws. Like, that's just the truth. And they actually thought that ended up being a pretty successful trade. Both teams went to the conference finals, despite swapping what was probably their second best player on their roster, maybe Julius Randle's third or fourth. But, you know, maybe you still think Rudy Gobert is better than he was. But in the actual playoffs, Ant was their best player. Julius Randle was probably number 2. And Cat's probably the second best player on the Knicks behind Jalen Brunson, at least the second most well-recognized. Make All-NBA, was an All-Star this year. But he has real flaws.
I think, you know, speaking of great NBA stories, the Jimmy Butler, the way it ended in Minnesota should have ended the careers of Andrew Wiggins, Karl-Anthony Towns, and pretty much did end the career of Scott Layden. Speaking of Scott Layden.
Yeah.
If you're not familiar with it, Jimmy Butler was basically holding out of camp because he was disgruntled. And he was disgruntled by the effort of the star players of the team that were making all of the money in Karl-Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins at the time. So he flew in to training camp with the Timberwolves, picked the worst 5 guys on the roster, scrimmaged against the starting 5, beat them, and walked out of the gym yelling at Scott Layden. And that was the last time he would appear in that facility.
Yeah.
And then was shortly traded to Philadelphia, coincidentally enough, only to be let go via free agency to go to Miami.
Right.
But that story, because he was talking, his whole point is that Wiggins and Cat don't have heart. And they're not going to do the hard things it takes to succeed at a high level in the NBA. And he was 1,000% correct.
Yeah.
About really everybody involved. And I know Andrew Wiggins kind of bailed it out with a I don't know, what would you call it? I know Golden State, but like a role player in Golden State, right?
Yeah.
Not a star player. And I know we made the All-Star team once in Golden State, but that was just a vote thing. So it tells you everything you need to know about Karl-Anthony Towns. You can't tell me he's not capable of being a good defensive player. And in fact, if you look at what the Knicks players are complaining about, quote, too often, Cat executed incorrect coverages without communicating why. After it became a theme, players worried Towns didn't grasp the importance. Yeah, because he doesn't want to.
He's not good at it, and he doesn't want to.
He doesn't want to.
Yeah.
It was always a red flag that Minnesota traded for Rudy Gobert. It was all to placate Karl-Anthony Towns, who didn't want to do hard things like
Rebound.
Body up and rebound.
Yeah.
That's red flag stuff in the NBA.
Block shots.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's no shock that it's been a day and teammates are like, yeah, this Karl-Anthony Towns guy. You know what? Jimmy Butler might have been right all those years ago. And it's interesting, we're talking about Austing Ainge and we're talking about the direction of the Jazz and what the next step is, who the next step is. Well, listen, you've got to have players that are fit a culture that Will Hardy's trying to create. And you got to avoid people like Karl-Anthony Towns, even though he's so talented.
Very talented, ultimately flawed, and he's
best offensive big man in the league. Yeah, never going to win.
Yeah, he's probably the best, other than Jokic, obviously. But yeah, he's up in that conversation. His ability to shoot the ball is truly ridiculous. It's awesome. He is so flawed at the most important thing big guys do. You can overvalue what Walker Kessler brings to the Jazz and how valuable he actually is and misread that. The truth is, though, Walker does the thing that you need your big guy to do most, which is makes it hard to score in the paint. He just does. He's a really good shot blocker. He dissuades players from even driving to the paint because he's in there. He's not as good as Rudy Gobert was at his prime, but he's really good.
He might be the best rebounder in the league.
Yeah, and right now he's one of the best, if not the best rebounder in the league. So there's a lot of value in that. And
Cat does none of it.
And it may not help you win very much.
Nope.
Certainly nice to have, and the threat of it and creating floor spacing and being able to play 5 out, which is why the Jazz do want to get a guy who can step out and shoot threes as well and are trying to get Walker to dabble in it because the value is there for it, but you can't do it at the cost of all the other more important things you do, which is being a good defensive player.
Beware, and this may play into your conversation, which interestingly enough, Keith Smith didn't really agree with, but about the cap and how it's changing things and that sort of thing. We talk about the old maid, the bad contract, right? Nobody wants to get stuck with the old maid. Beware of highly flawed, highly paid players.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't be that highly paid and have a fatal flaw.
Not to pick on David Locke, but he has kind of advocated in recent months, not advocated, that's too strong, but brought up the possibility of trading for Trae Young. That is the player you have to avoid. James Harden, that's a great example. Yep. I mean, players that are so... I would even throw Luka Doncic into this, honestly.
Yeah, he might be. This is the Nico Harrison argument. Yep. You're exactly making the argument that Nico Harrison had, which is, yeah, we could have paid him 5 years and $300 million. He doesn't do the thing you have to be able to do to win.
His flaw is so bad that he can't make up for it with his other stuff. Karl-Anthony Towns can't make it. That's why Minnesota was so intrigued in getting Rudy. Okay, we'll get a big that wants to do the hard things, and then we'll let Karl do what Karl wants to do. And it's like, it didn't work speaking of Anthony Davis. That's exactly what he wanted in New Orleans, right? And they traded for Boogie Cousins. Disaster. For years in L.A., it was like, Anthony Davis wants to be the 4. Let's bring in all these stiffs at 5 so Anthony Davis doesn't have to do the hard things. No. They won the Mickey Mouse title when they made Anthony Davis play center. Yeah. And he's basically been their center since because that's his position.
Yeah. It's really hard to do. It's really hard to get perfect players, and there just aren't perfect players, and to be able to overcome your defensive weaknesses or your offensive weaknesses on the other end, it's hard to do when you make $30+ million. Jokic is so good offensively and at least talented enough or smart enough defensively to be in the right place and to be huge that he makes more of an impact on that end, certainly, than Cat does. And what does he do? Well, he's a really great rebounder. That's probably the thing that Jokic doesn't get enough credit for. He's an awesome rebounder.
Cat won't sit in there and rebound.
And Cat won't do it to that level. Yeah.
You're right about Jokic at least being big. Lateral quickness is Jokic's problem, obviously. but he still finds a way to be big.
How often does he get 20 rebounds? It's like every third game.
Shaq is actually the best example of this, that he found a way to be big even though he was super vulnerable defensively because of his lateral quickness.
But yeah, just be so
Cat
huge.
won't even do that.
Yeah.
Now, here's the wrinkle to the convo. And I'll use Evan Turner as an example because it's a relevant one. Right now, Evan Turner is a flawed guy. On the other side of Cat, he does all the hard things and he does it really well, but he's flawed offensively, right?
Yep.
But at $19 million, he's a steal and a key component on that team. At $40 million or $30 or whatever he's going to get this offseason, he's an overpaid, flawed player.
Yeah.
He goes from being the most important, arguably most important, or at least X factor on a title contending team to anchor on another team's franchise. If he leaves in free agency and signs a big deal somewhere else, he will be an anchor on that franchise. Because if you're going to pay someone, and I don't think he's a max guy by any means, but he's going up from 19.
Yeah.
If you pay somebody, you can make an argument to pay Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown max deals because their flaws really aren't that, okay, you say Jaylen Brown, the big complaint in Boston right now is he doesn't have a ton of wiggle.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? He can still score 30 a game and take the other team's best player out of on the other side of the ball.
Yeah.
You can overcome. Oh, okay. So he lacks a little creativity. So what?
Wiggle has quickly become the most overrated skill in the NBA.
Amen.
Who cares? Jokic doesn't have any.
He does have a little.
But LeBron doesn't have any. Giannis doesn't have any.
LeBron has never had any. Yeah.
Luka doesn't really have any.
Yeah.
Luka's really strong.
Right.
Giannis is really strong. LeBron's really strong. I don't care if you can go side to side. Who cares? What? Well, yeah, whatever. But
does it go in?
Jaylen Brown's. Yeah, right. Does Jaylen Brown get 20 points a game? And does he lock you up on the other end? Okay. There's value there. I don't care if he goes side to side. Who cares?
Is his lack of wiggle going to cause you to lose basketball games? Probably not.
Yeah, you know who doesn't have a lot of wiggle? Isaiah Collier. You know what he is? He's the fastest person in the league, and he's really strong. There's value there.
Yep.
I don't care that he doesn't cross you over. Who cares?
But this is a great point. But you can't pay him a third of your cap.
No, absolutely not. He's too fatally flawed to pay that much money.
Because I can hear people yelling at their radio, like, there's only like 5 of the guys you're talking about. It's like, yes, that's why the Supermax is not a good move unless
you have the right guy.
It's one of those 5 guys. And the teams that have got tempted into maxing out, or more appropriately, super maxing out players just because those players end up being the old maid.
The best player tax. I've always said that.
Yep.
You can't get caught paying your best player a max salary just because they're the best player on your team. Are they actually good enough? And this will be a question for Lauri Markkanen and why the Jazz might be willing to move him, because the Jazz are paying him a high salary. Now, it's not so exorbitantly high, even though it's a max deal, that they can't afford it or that he can't earn it, but he is a flawed player. He's not a good defender.
Yeah.
He's not a lead number one offensive scorer, though he can lead your team in scoring. Can you get a player who has fewer flaws at a same price range who maybe is not as good as any one thing as Lowry is as a shooter scorer? And that might be the trade the Jazz have to make.
The Jazz, this is an interesting discussion because the situation is a little different. The Jazz have to pay somebody. There's a league minimum.
And
they have to pay somebody. They were also in danger of losing what became a significant asset for nothing. And I don't think, if you gave Danny Ainge truth serum, I would guess that even when they signed the deal, did not forecast him finishing the deal in Utah. Just a guess. I don't know that. But I bet.
But I agree with you.
Even then, they thought the likelihood of him finishing in Utah was quite low. Plus, the TV deal is going to kick in and all that stuff, where all of a sudden it's not quite as painful as it was. But if I was another team that was pretty capped out and trying to make one more move, I'd be a little skeptical of Lowry. Now, maybe right fit, it's the perfect move for somebody like you've brought up, Houston a lot.
Houston, yeah.
Which maybe that makes a ton of sense, and that's what they're lacking, and it's a good fit. But I would look at it with a little bit of a side eye going, how's this going to go if we give him, what is he at?
$40 million.
I know, but what percentage of the cap is that? I'd have to get in and do the math, but what is it?
30%.
30%?
Yeah.
Because Supermax is 35.
Maybe it's 25%, but whatever. I think it might be 25. Whatever.
Is that
too much?
Is that too much? I mean, you got to really look at that sort of thing. For Karl-Anthony Towns, way too much.
It is. Yeah. The money he makes, which is he not the highest paid player in the NBA? He's one of them. He's up there. Yeah. It's just too much money
Who's
for
a max guy
who has that many flaws.
Too much.
Yep.
Bradley Beal, way too much.
Yeah. Way too flawed.
And that'll sink you. Phoenix is in the position they're in because of Bradley Beal. Now, it's not his fault, just like it wasn't Andre Karolinko's fault when he became the old maid here in Utah. But he is the reason that they can't maneuver and do anything to make themselves better.
It's just a good lesson to learn, and looking at the drafts, it's the same way, and apply it. If you don't play defense, you can't be the best player available. If you're that fatally flawed on one side of the ball, especially in the top 5, you can't be the best player available. Even if your one offensive skill is better. Look, Pascal Siakam, and he's been awesome, don't get me wrong. Like, he can score 30 in a playoff game, but he's awesome because he can really play both sides of the ball, right? He's a good defensive player, switchy, can defend multiple positions. Great. You like to have him.
Tough.
But he's not going to go out and score 30 points a game and average a night, but he's more valuable right now than Karl-Anthony Towns was in this series.
Way more valuable. But he's always been more valuable. That's the trick, We fall in love with one-sided players that are extremely limited and prima donnas who think that they're something that they're not. I mean, I could tell you from my childhood several examples of this, but have you ever played in a pickup game with somebody who's big who doesn't want to be?
Yeah, yes, of
course.
course.
Like 6'6" guy at the sports mall
who wants to shoot threes.
Who wants to shoot threes the whole time because he doesn't want to, that doesn't work.
Right.
That guy is so guardable now. You make yourself go from unguardable to guardable. Anyway, we fall in love with these things and we ignore the flaws. And the thing is, dumb general managers fall in love with it too, and especially with number 1 picks and oh my gosh, this guy's our franchise. And he's not.
Yep. Yeah, he's not.
And you can't pay him like he is.
And we'll see if they shop him around. And maybe they will.
Oh, no, I think he's becoming the old maid.
He might.
He might,
yeah.
No thanks, Leon. I'm not taking that problem off your hands.
Yeah.
Hard pass.
Right.
Whereas Julius Randle, I think, actually is more tradable than he was going into the playoffs.
Yeah, he's only got 1 year left on his deal. Absolutely.
Man, both those players should flip again.
Yeah, they easily could.
If both teams
Not
know
easily
what's good
could,
for
but
them.
there's a chance that they could. Yep.
Well, the Knicks should fire their coach, trade out Karl-Anthony Towns, cut Jalen Brunson.
Lose their entire identity.
Probably trade Josh Hart.
Okay. Good two-way player.
Can't move off Bridges. You spent too much to get him.
Yeah, he did pay a lot. Pay a lot to get Bridges.
And then change ownership. And maybe they'll get to the finals eventually.
Yeah.
Cut Jalen Brunson just out of spite. Oh, you got to fire his dad at the same time. Speaking of nepotism.
Yeah.
That one's kind of going the other way, though.
Right.
You look at Brunson's dad and be like, you think you'd be here if your last name was Anderson?
Yeah, right. Would you still be here? Would you still be on the staff? Hey, he might be a Tips guy. He's been a Knicks guy for a while, right?
Yeah, since a month before they signed Jalen.
Well, he played there, right? Did he play for the Knicks?
I have no idea, nor do I care.
Yeah.
But they hired him right before they signed Jalen. Way to go, Dallas. Was that Nico, too, who didn't re-up Jalen? Yeah. It was. That wasn't Donnie. That was Nico. Way to go, Dallas. He was going to sign for a
$40 million.
Yeah. All right, stay tuned.
4 years, $40 million. They said that's too rich for us.
Oh, my goodness, no.
Not you.
Stay tuned. More next, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
This is DJ and PK.
The Jazz have added to their front office Austing Ainge, president of basketball operations.
Double A coming home. I'd covered Austin. I was beat writer for the Watchdog at the time, and he has an excellent mind. He used to discuss stuff with me that it was obvious to me he's going to be in basketball at some point. Austin has trained for this for many, many years. Of that, I'm assured. Obviously, he's got the same last name, but beyond that, I can speak to he's got an excellent mind for the game, which I think is important these days. You have to present a message, and it has to be presented in a manner that reflects well on your entire franchise and your organization, and I think he'll do that. And I like they did it now because he's got basically a whole month to get on board with what the line of thinking is going forward here.
Catch DJ and PK mornings from 6 to 10 on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Who's got it better than us?
Your home for the best sports coverage in Utah. You're listening to Jake Scott and Ben Anderson on 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.
Two amigos on the airways, talking sports. They got him Matrix and also loves his tie-dye. Ben's got style with his scarf. Oh my.
Jake and Ben, 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. This segment brought to you by Peach Doors and Windows. Amazing home transformations begin with Peach, where 5-star reviews are the norm. Call them today for your free in-home estimate, 801-566-1255. Ben and I were having a chat. Maybe we have more of a long-form chat about this at some point, but the flaw in stats and analytics and, sometimes you should just believe your own eyes. Think about that terrible movie, the Jonah Hill analytics vehicle with Brad Pitt. That team never won the World Series.
Sure.
They got to the playoffs, and then they lost to the Yankees. Because at some point, the 6'5" guy that mashes it out of the park
still has value.
Is going to beat your wonky math formula. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because this is still sports. Bigger, stronger, faster, and frankly, more skilled is, you would tell me, and you made a great point. You would tell me that Nikola Jokic and Karl-Anthony Towns were kind of in the same neighborhood.
They're probably both
as
right there.
Players.
12.7 rebounds per game if we're talking about rebounding.
If you look at their stats, statistically, Jokic is better, but it's not.
If you were only looking at the box score, you wouldn't know.
Mile.
Yeah.
You watch those two play and you go, oh.
Yep.
Well, this guy in Denver is significantly more impactful.
Totally different caliber.
Than Karl-Anthony Towns.
Yeah.
You just can't get the whole story with stats. And that's where, to bring the show full circle, because, we started talking about Austing Ainge and basketball people, where you go, oh, that guy's a basketball guy, or these are basketball people. It's such a subjective business. There's no definition of that. You know what I mean? You want a basketball guy who knows basketball, who's going to make the right decisions because they know the game, not because they looked at a spreadsheet.
I don't think you have to have played at a certain high level to understand basketball. You know what I mean? I think it helps if you've been on a basketball court in a 5-on-5 situation and understood what is valuable and what's not valuable.
Yep.
And Danny Ainge has done that, and Austing Ainge has done that, and I think those things do translate. Will Hardy's clearly done it. He played at Williams College. I think knowing what some of those things work, and they just scale up. It's not like it's a totally different game in the NBA than it is even at the lower levels. Like the talent is obviously enormously different, but knowing what works on an NBA court and what generates advantages on a court is something you can know from playing at BYU or playing in high school and take to the next level that I think might be hard to replicate fully if you never played.
Yeah, 100% agree. It's stats and analytics can be a tool, but people...
Well, and the hard part about stats and analytics is that they are adoptable by everybody. Right. What is not adoptable by everybody is 6'5" masher. Right? That's ultimately the problem. I can teach Aaron Judge the analytics, and I can put Aaron Judge within the analytics. I can't take Aaron Judge's physical advantages and drop them on 6'1" Tim Elko or what, you know what I mean? Yeah. Whatever, and say, but also do that. Also have the amount of power that you can mistakenly hit a ball out. That's an advantage you still get from Judge that you can't teach. It's the cliche. You can't teach size. That means more than just actual height.
Sorry, I'm a little distracted. I found a story that Rudy Gobert's ex-girlfriend is shading him on the Snapchat.
Well, he's had a rough month.
Let's see. She reposted a text graphic that says, "You have every right to speak your truth, to share what happened and how it affected you. Their discomfort isn't your responsibility. If they wanted to be seen in a better light, they should have treated you better."
Rudy, if you don't know the story, had a baby with his fiance. Is that what they're saying?
No, they were married.
They were married?
Uh-huh.
Okay, good for Rudy.
I think they got married.
Regardless, he had a baby, and then she got pregnant again, and the story is he kicked her out. Or at least that's kind of the short story. I don't think that's fully what happened, obviously, but they are no longer together as she's pregnant with their second child.
Rough.
Not a great look for
No.
the personal lives of children in Minnesota has not been.
No.
Been good.
It's been, at least the headlines have been terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Noisy personal life, Ben.
Rudy's noisy.
Rudy
Rudy's
is
a noisy person.
He's always been noisy.
And apparently it's noisy everywhere.
That's why what's-his-name punched him in the face.
He and Kyle Anderson punched each other.
I've I've never seen anything like that.
No, that was crazy.
We've seen contentious teams. We've seen teams that don't like each other.
Of course.
We've seen
every team doesn't like each other.
Lots of players that don't like each other. Never seen one just say, you know what, screw it, and throw down, punch the other right in the face.
Is it in the playoffs or was it just late regular season?
It was in the playoffs.
And then Jaden McDaniels broke his hand punching the wall on his way out in a different...
Noisy.
Yeah.
Real noisy. That's why, seriously, Oklahoma City's superpower might be they're not noisy at all. And you know what? Indiana isn't noisy at all either.
The Knicks should trade Cat for Rudy Gobert.
Just swap with the... Oh, man. All right, stay tuned. Hanson, Scotty G are coming up next.
Thanks, Christian.
97.5, the KSL Sports Zone.